Start.
Awesome. All right, guys, welcome to Nurture the Light. You want to press present?
Everyone can see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
I pressed the button and it's not. Okay. Here we go.
Let's present. Okay. Okay. Here we go. This talk is called Nurture the Light. And here I'm going to present a new model for children's mental health and how it's so important to nurture the nurturers. Nurturers are considered people who support children in this context, whether it be parents, teachers, community leaders, coaches, doctors. The key to children's mental wellness is the mental health of those who nurture them. Next slide. So many of you know me already. Many of you have worked with me in the clinic, in Tiara. My name is Dr. Blickstein. I'm a child adolescent psychiatrist. I'm the founder of Teal Dragon, an integrative psychiatry clinic based in Stamford, Connecticut. I have over 15 years of clinical experience in the field, in family medicine, pediatrics, adult and child psychiatry. And I wrote a book called A Journey to Family Unity, and I've worked with over 500 families to heal and reunify them using attunement. I'm a very proud attuned mom of two beautiful boys, ages 14 and 16. I'm also a performer, a singer, and a clown. And my clown might come out in this lecture. We will see.
Be warned.
Be warned, be forewarned. Awesome. Next slide. Okay, so I just want to share a little bit about my personal story. I want to be vulnerable. And obviously, what is being created here has stemmed out of a very personal experience of desiring to reunify with my children. So I got divorced when I was 36. My kids were about 5 and 7 at the time. It was initially amicable, but then it became tumultuous and not so amicable. And my children were unfortunately stuck in the middle. And trust was completely lost between me and my children. Now, my kids don't come and say, I don't trust you, mommy. I don't trust you anymore. Let's build this relationship. No, it came out with aggression. It came out with physical aggression, verbal aggression, just overall a lot of pain and a lot of frustration and a lot of tantrums. And I was totally lost, totally lost. I felt unsupported. I felt terrible as a mom. Actually, I thought I was doing great as I thought that I didn't understand why my kids were acting out because I was doing what I needed to be doing as a mom. And it was my children who were misbehaving. And there was one incident in which there was escalation in the house, and my son took a bottle, and I don't think he meant to hurt me, but he threw it at me and it hit the middle of my head, and it caused like a scar, and it was just a shocking moment. And at a certain point, I said to their father that my kids were growing, they were getting bigger, and I said, I can't have my kids at home. I don't feel safe, and I don't know what to do. And it was at that point when I realized that there was something not healthy about the situation. And I would look around and I would go out and I would see parents holding their kids' hands and having conversations. And I'm like, there's something not normal going on in my home. And my kids also didn't even want to touch me. They didn't want to get close to me. They didn't want to hold my hand. And it was very, very painful. I was just sitting in my pain and not knowing what to do. And that summer we went upstate to a family friend, and my mom's friend gave me a book called Parenting Effectiveness Training by Thomas Gordon about how to raise responsible children. And once I read that book, it started slowly changing how I managed my family and how I managed the children. And that slowly grew into the Attunement Model of Care. After I read the book, I started training parents in PET, parenting effectiveness training, and then that evolved into the Attunement Model, which I'm going to discuss. And it completely transformed the way I see parents, the way I see children, and the way I see child psychiatry in general. And long story short, I have a beautiful, loving relationship with my children now. It's full of love, connection, and authenticity, which I'm really proud of. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about attunement and the principles in attunement. So one of the biggest problems in child psychiatry is that we designate the child as a patient. Okay? In the attunement model of care, we have a nurturer and a receiver. The nurturer is the parent. The receiver is the child. When the receiver reacts, it is not a receiver problem. It is a nurturer problem. Let me say this again. In the attunement model, we have two roles. We have a nurturer and we have a receiver. If the receiver reacts, it is a nurturer problem. Within the paradigm of child psychiatry and overall child mental health, the reactor is the problem, which is why we designate the child as the designated patient. But when we designate the reactor as the designated patient, we're not looking at what they're reacting to. And when we're not looking at what they're reacting to, we're not solving or addressing the roots of their reactivity. All of mental illness within child psychiatry, within the DSM, are expressions of reactivity. Inattention, anxiety, depression, isolation, anything within the DSM are expressions of reactivity. And when the child expresses reactivity, whatever form, whatever sort, they're expressing a reaction to an unattuned relational environment. And so the goal in attunement is to attune their relational environment so that they can be less reactive. The question, though, is how do we do that? How do we know how unattuned a relational environment is? How do we know how unattuned a relational environment is? And how do we improve our relational environment to lower the child's reactivity? Because people could understand that a child comes from a toxic family environment or they're in a school that's not attuning, but how do we measure this and how do we improve it? And so that's why we developed the attunement score and the attunement model. So through the attunement model of care, we can adequately and sufficiently assess the health of a relational environment, and we can then measure how we can improve it. Before I continue, does anyone have any questions? Okay. If you do, maybe they're in the chat, you can put a question. All right. I'll continue and then we'll open up to questions. So our current system is not working. Whenever we designate the child as the designated patient or any reactor within a nurturer-receiver relationship, we really don't get anywhere because the relational environment doesn't change. We all know the statistics. We have 43% of recidivism, which is returning to the hospital for the same reason. 1 in 5 children with a mental health disorder diagnosed. 1 in 4 kids rehospitalized. Between 50% and 93% of behavioral health professionals, mothers, teachers, fathers report experiencing burnout. And we have our suicide rates tripling. And this is even higher now since COVID. It's gone down a little bit in the last year, but we're in a situation where we seriously need attuned relational environments. So let me talk a little bit about the attunement model and Tiara and how we actually measure this. Next slide. So when we go into an environment, it could be a school, it could be a family, it could be a community. We first do a needs assessment to assess if the nurturers understand their role and the receivers understand their role. And largely, most people don't. Most people are enmeshed. Most people have a lot of energetic, we call it, they own another's problem. So there's a lot of commingling of emotions that is very unhealthy, especially within family dynamics. And I'm sure people here who've worked with families can give me plenty of examples of this. One example I can share is I always say to parents, don't ever steal your child's problem. Don't ever steal your child's problem, because the child's problem is their opportunity for agency and power. And for the parents, I say, own your problem. Own your problem. If a child's doing something and you're dysregulated, it's not a harm to self or others, and you're dysregulated about it, that's your problem. And a lot of parents have difficulty differentiating problem ownership. That's just one example of how we assess the health of a relational environment and how attuned it is. When we have nurturers acting as receivers and receivers acting as nurturers, we have a very imbalanced dynamic. And when it comes to minor children who need to receive, that's how we perpetuate transgenerational trauma. The example I like to give is a nurturer is akin to someone watering a plant, and a receiver is the plant, it is the soil. When the roles reverse and the soil waters the water and the water, it's a mess. It doesn't make sense and it doesn't flow. And it's what I call that is a retrograde pattern. So up until this point, the reason we've so successfully continued a pattern of transgenerational trauma is because of a retrograde parent-child pattern in which the parents suck energy out of the child. They're actually receivers, and the children are parentified. That is called retrograde pattern. It's an opposite pattern that is out of balance. And when a child has their energy sucked and is acting as a parent, they grow up to suck energy. They grow up not as nurturers. They have to pull in energy. They can't actually nurture. So I'm just giving some examples of how this imbalance shows up. I teach also about the stress continuum, which is a much, much more simplified way of understanding child reactivity as opposed to the hundreds of diagnoses in the DSM. I simplify the model into 3 very distinct areas: the hyperreactive response, the hyporeactive response, and the dissociative response. I'm not going to go into details about the stress continuum, but when people are dysregulated, they lie somewhere on the stress continuum. It's not a binary model, mentally ill, non-mentally ill. It's a continuum. We are all human beings. We all get stressed. The question is, where do we predominantly lie, and how do we move that predominance closer to balance? And then one of the key features I talk about in training is the idea of parental narcissism. Parental narcissism is critical, because when I realized my child's reactivity was because of me, and I was the parental narcissist trying to impose and control, that's when my world changed. Okay, so my question to you is, what would happen on a mass global scale if we started improving relational environments, and that was our focus as a community, if we started training our teachers to be nurturers, if we started training our doctors to understand the attunement model and not to go along with the paradigm of designating the reactor as the problem, what would happen? And that's what the attunement model is all about. It's a movement. That's why we're calling it the family attunement movement. It's a movement in which the people and the families take ownership so as not to fall into labels and dehumanizing methodologies that focus on the reactor as the problem, and then can take responsibility to become more nurturing and nurturing within a balanced way. So essentially, attunement training nurtures so that you can then manage the community, the synagogue, the school in a way in which teachers are nurtured. And then when teachers are nurtured, they're not reactors. Most of the child reactivity we see is because of a dysregulated nervous system of their nurturer. Those teachers need nurturance and guidance and regulation. And I'm sure we've all had different experiences, maybe as a child yourself, or in seeing your children being faced with an unattuned environment. And for me, it's very angering, right? Because we're putting our children into environments with unattuned nurturance. And it's our responsibility as parents and community leaders to make conscious choices or to take a stand and say, this collective of teachers need more nurturance. Great. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so I've developed a model called Tiara, which is the Interpersonal Awareness and Relational Attunement Method, which is a new standard for assessing and treating and tracking mental health by tracking relational health. And it's a rehumanization of mental health because it's focused on relationships instead of symptoms. It's not a behavioral method because behavior is always downstream of relationships. Behavior is always downstream of relationships. Everything starts with the bond, with the level of attunement. Next slide. So the interpersonal awareness makes you become more aware. When you take the assessments, you become more aware of your level of attunement. You know what your level of attunement is. It's in a numerical score. And then through the trainings, you can align to be a more nurturing nurturer, or I call it a more attuned nurturer. And our results have shown this. Over the last 5 years in our clinic, we have had the consistent results showing decrease in reactivity in children over 12 weeks in time on any sort of dysregulation, from dysregulated mood disorder to autism spectrum disorder to obsession, OCD, panic, aggression, you name it. Our sweet spot were ages 6 to 16, but we've seen results before age 6 and after age 16 as well. Here are just some examples of case studies with using Tiara, how we've had tantrum improvement, frustration improvement, hopelessness in parents improve, frustration in parents improve, and the attunement measure. And then we compared it without Tiara. Yeah,
this is the clown part of the
okay.
Me going back and forth on the slide.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
I was wondering though, Adena, do you want to
Yes.
share a little about your experience with how things changed with your kids as you started implementing attunement with them? Because it's so different now, I know.
Yeah, so my experience, I wouldn't say my experience was very nonlinear and very long because I didn't know what I was doing and I was learning and practicing over time. So my personal experience was very, very gradual and took about 6 years. But initially, when I started attuning to them, for example, my children were they didn't want to share anything with me. They were very closed. And I started opening up to them about my life and my day. And that's what I always encourage people to do when a child shut down. How much are you open with them? How vulnerable are you with them? But I distinguish between dumping and vulnerability as a nurturer. So I started sharing without any, just in the car, just started sharing about my day without them initiating anything, because nurturers have to initiate all the time. You cannot expect a receiver to initiate. And that's how our relationship started to heal. But it took a long time. And there was a lot of resistance because the pattern was so embedded that I was a controlling, cold mother, which now I can see that, but I wasn't able to see that at that point. As I started opening my heart and growing into more connection with myself, that relationship just grew over time, with them being vulnerable with me, them being open with me, them wanting to be with me, them wanting to spend time with me. Now I'm so grateful when they want to spend time with me. They're off with their friends and doing a lot of things. I'm just so excited when they say, yeah, we want to be with you, we want to hang out with you. But my process was very painful and very long. But since teaching the training and doing the training, because I've able to consolidate all the information and the teachings, people see results within 6 to 12 weeks. It doesn't take 6 years like it took for me. Does
And
it
I just
want to
want to
share their
say,
story? Yeah.
well, I just want to say that being around your kids is like amazing. Like they're just so present, honest, like loving. Um, and it's not, it's striking, unfortunately, because in this current day and age, what you expect to experience when you're with a teenager is not that level of relationship and connection, and it's really amazing. It's palpable. Um,
Thank you. And
yeah,
I think it's important that we don't badmouth our kids. And part of being in an attuned community is not sitting there and complaining about how nasty your teenager is. That is a no-no, because they're human beings. And part of being within an attuned community is always sharing your attunement wins and how connected you are and how close you are and how wonderful it is to be around each other. And when you struggle, you seek support, but you don't blame the reactor. As part of the collective, I think we need to adopt those ways of being, because I think complaining about the kids is a way of not taking responsibility and not seeking your own support that you really need as a parent. Does anyone want to share a personal attunement win if they've been to my trainings or I've worked with them? Does anyone want to share a little nugget of an attunement win?
I have something I can share, certainly.
Yeah.
This is so important. I'm sitting here like taking copious notes, as you know, I always do, because I'm thinking about these two extreme on the spectrum, if you think about, and how kids are growing up in environments that are hierarchical, right? You have teacher, you have parents, you have all these people that are said to be over them and like overlords of a sort. And when we greet each other in Zulu, we always say Sawubona. Sawubona is literally the humanity in me greets the humanity in you. And I'm thinking about, as you know, when I lost my wife and daughter in a car accident and got involved with, we don't have foster care kids in Africa, they're in orphanages. But I remember uh, getting involved with a young male who, to your point, he kept stealing my vehicle. Right. And so by the time we go to court, court is a long process. It doesn't go alphabetical order. So if you go in a court process, you could be there all day. And so I kept taking this kid back into my home, and the judge wanted to know why. You know, he literally said, the judge says, well, this young man is depriving you of your property. Why would you take him back? And I told the judge, well, you know, he's allowed to give up on himself, but I'm not going to give up on him just yet because I see something in him. But I thought about that because, you know, juveniles are not criminals. They commit what's called delinquent acts. So it wasn't until in therapy, this young man said, you know, I'm tired of adults. I'm tired of authority. I'm always being told what to do. So in other words, it was expressing that no one is seeing him and no one is nurturing him. And I think that's what people are looking for. The young people around the world are looking for today when I see who they're aspiring to be and how we have such poor examples of leadership around the world in today's time, right? And so I think about that because, as you know, in medical school, when I studied neurobiology, I'm thinking, wow, this is important to nurture the nurturer. And for people, for parents to understand they are nurturers, because in the brain, the processes such as the anterior cingulate cortex that forms our reasoning capacities, that forms our self-evaluation, self-judgment, that doesn't fully develop in children till you're like 25. So that identity formation window between ages 15 and 25, wow, is very impressionable to these things they're seeing on TV, and they see this masculinity, these things out there, and so they strive for it. There's no nurturing in that, but they're quite vulnerable because the amygdala and other processes of the emotion are heightened, right? And so if a parent don't understand they are a nurturer and they don't play that role, well, my goodness, this is why we have such chaos with kids and such a gap in understanding the relational dynamics between adults and parents, adults and kids right now. And that's
Right.
so important. I'm seeing this more and more. In Africa, we have the youngest population in the world. US has an aging crisis. Japan has an aging crisis. By 2050, it's projected 1 out of 4 citizens will be of African descent. And so this stuff weighs heavily on my mind. So I'm glad you're doing this, and hopefully people follow up with this. But I was sitting here just thinking about all of the institutions and things that incubate young people and how there's such an extreme. You have hierarchy on one side, and then these relational dynamics on the other.
Yes. Brian, thank you so much, because the problem that most nurturers face is that they don't believe in their power of nurturance. They're not confident enough to believe in their power of nurturance, and they're not supported enough either. And it's carried forward transgenerationally in the anterograde pattern. So the reason we can't present an empowered model of masculinity, for example, is because that parent was a receiver. So nobody's being filled up, basically. But now with this system and with this structure, we're going to make it anterograde. And what attunement does is it gives those parents and nurturers the capacity and the confidence to know who they really are. They're really nurturers, and they can be. And that just puts people into alignment and confidence, as opposed to being flailing between permissive parenting and authoritarian parenting, which is all a flail. They're both extremes are symptoms of dysregulated parenting. And then they follow up, do I do this? And do I do this? When you're aligned and attuned, you are not flailing. And there's no let the child do whatever they want and be permissive, or my way or the highway. Those are two extremes. And that's why I don't like to say, I don't follow necessarily parenting ideas, because in attunement, you're so connected with yourself. You're so attuned to yourself that decisions are intuitive and relational. They're not being followed of how do I get my child to do this and behaviorally control and manage. It's not that at all, at all.
Let me ask this quick question. I don't want to take over your whole webinar here, but again, I kind of think out loud. So I have to write things down before I forget. In your work, because I know fellow physicians we don't get it, right? Like there's a lot of unconsciousness when it comes to the dynamic of relations or parent-child, let alone patient-physician relationship. How many are you seeing like are actually conscious of this? Because I'm thinking about they're conscious of it, like they have that kind of awareness. I'm thinking I wrote down two words when you were talking: restoration and revival. When you were sharing your story, and if you think about that, how people come back from these so-called broken relationships or broken dynamics of their childhood, is typically from this perspective of restoration. That word literally means something worn out, broken, or torn apart. Contrast that to revival, what you're offering. That word literally means a return to consciousness, an awakening. I'm wondering how many people are actually aware of this dynamic, where they are, how they're meeting each moment, and from which that orientation shapes everything in terms of reactivity and or responsiveness. There's a
Well,
huge difference.
the moment someone comes into our field and takes a self-attunement score, that's when their awareness is activated. It is largely unconscious, because what has not been seen in you, you cannot see in others. If a child is raised unseen, they have no capacity to see it in their children. And that's why the unconscious repression, for example, if creativity was repressed in a father, they will unconsciously repress creativity in their child without even realizing how they're doing it. And then the child will scream and get depressed and be suicidal. And everyone's like, oh, medicate the child. No, this dad is not seeing his child's gift of music.
I think it's also that it's not conscious, but then as soon as they, do the attunement score, as soon as they get that click, it becomes conscious very quickly, because we've all been children in that unattuned environment, wondering like what the heck is going on. So once you realize, oh, my experience of not being attuned to is what my kid is experiencing, there's sort of like a natural, quick way of understanding. I think we're programmed for connection and relationship. And so once we wake up out of that, it's like, oh yeah, that didn't make any sense. This way makes so much more sense. Being attuned, being relational feels so much more natural, I think.
And the children will call us out. Yeah, Kelly.
And something I want to say, just adding to that, when he was saying who's aware of where they're at, right? Because we're not aware where we are. And I've taken your attunement, and my daughter will call me out and be like, this is not about you. She'll just tell me, and I'm like, yes, she's right. I'm making this about me. It's not about me. So it's amazing once they are on the same wavelength, they can say that, and you're not like, oh, she's not being, she's being 100%. She knows I'm not being, the best mom. I'm making it about me. There's something going on with me. So that's just something we don't know, but they do call you out. Yeah.
It's about being humble and not authoritarian.
Yeah.
And to see our children as ways to help us to heal ourselves, but not to be like, this is how it is because I'm saying so, because like little humans are not lesser humans. And I think the systems that we've been taught have been really dehumanizing children. Yes, Kayla.
Yeah, the dehumanizing, because I think we have this listening of children that's automatic, that's like they don't know how to behave, they have to be, trained and all of that stuff. And what I have found in my attunement journey is that the things that I was wanting my son to do differently, for example, please don't drop the towel on the floor after the shower, like please don't drop your clothes on the floor, like please, like no matter how many times I say it, it's like he's not changing his behavior, right? when I stopped focusing on that and just focused on being present with him as a whole human being who has this whole life experience, who's sad sometimes, frustrated sometimes, overwhelmed sometimes. Sometimes he's scared in a way he's never been before ever in his life because he's only 9 and he's never experienced something like what he experienced today. So it's brand new. And I'm just being with him in that. He literally just put the towel away. He just literally put his clothes in the hamper. I didn't even have to ask him. It's like, we have to understand that children are, they're designed to live in harmony with a family. And if they're not, it's not because of them. It's because of the environment. That's a small example, and I could give so many more. Like, I was really feeling like I was losing him to like screen addiction, and was starting to get to this place where it was like I'd drop him off at the bus stop or I'd drop him off at school and I'd be like, bye. And he would just get out of the car without saying anything to me. And it was a small thing that you could think, oh, whatever. But it was like a dagger in my heart. Like, oh my God, my child won't even say goodbye to me. And as I have healed and attuned to him, um, we used to argue every single day, and I would yell at him about the iPad. He used to sneak it around and hide it from me. Now we have open conversations about it. We have a specific structure that kind of like works for us. And he does his iPad from 7 to 8. He's like really loves this Roblox game. So I decided to make a party for it. Every Tuesday we have Taco Tuesday parties. And it's like, it just, before the attunement, it looked so black and white. It was like, the games are addictive, the screen time is addictive. And I'm not saying that people who are making games and the whatever doesn't need to be responsible for how that's affecting children's brains, but um it's so different. And he gives me hugs. When I pick him up from school, he always says goodbye most of the time. Sometimes he's very focused on his conversation with his friend, but the point is also, I don't spiral into this like fear when he's disengaged or something, because I know our bond is strong and it just is going to keep getting stronger. Because whenever I'm upset about his behavior, I, instead of trying to get him to change, I think about what he needs, what kind of nurturing does he need right now.
Amazing. This is
It's
the question.
good.
This is a question we have to ask ourselves. That I love that. Instead of looking at how I can get him to change, I ask myself what kind of nurturing he needs right now. If every nurturer, leader started asking themselves those questions when faced with reactivity of any sort, like whether their employee, whether their child, that they're getting reactive, and they start asking themselves, what kind of nurturance can I offer right now? We will have a different world. So this is our world. This is the world, an attuned world where children and providers thrive. And our systems and our structures thrive as a result. Next slide. So I'm going to lead everyone here in a meditation, a visualization of their desired system, right? So if it's your family, that's your desired system. If it's your community, that's your desired system. If it's your school or child's school, that's your desired system. And it could be all of them. So I'm going to ask everyone just to put everything down. Put the pens, papers, phones, relax your hands, relax your body, relax your shoulders. And I'm going to bring you into a 5-minute visualization. So everybody close your eyes. And take a deep breath. And I want you to connect to your own spirit, your own higher power. And I want you to connect down into the earth and connect to the roots. Root into the earth. And I want you to think of one person in your life that needs more nurturance. It could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be a child, it could be anyone. And I want you to imagine yourself as the ultimate nurturer. And through you and your heart energy, you can nurture them simply through your energy. You don't need anything else. So I want you to link your heart to their heart and create a funnel and a flow of divine love that is directed towards their heart. In you being the source of that nurturance. So feel that energy moving. And let this meditation activate you to know that you can be the source of others' nurturing. And you alone, as an individual, can nurture. Because you have the capacity and the resources to do that. Now, as you're putting your heart energy into them, I want you to imagine them lighting up with that energy. And because they're lighting up with that energy, they can then shine their light onto another link within your structure. So if it's a family member, an uncle, you'll say you're shining light into uncle's heart. Uncle can then shine light into his children or his partner. So imagine light going into that nurturer that is then nurturing their community, their system that you chose. If it's a teacher, if it's a principal, you're shining your energy into the principal, and the principal is then nurturing the teachers, and then the teachers are then nurturing the children. So follow that heart link, follow that heart beam, and allow it to fill the structure that you chose. And then encircle the structure. So link up the structure. So if it's a school and you've linked up the teachers and they've nurtured the kids, link it up and close it. Close the loop of the structure. Close the structural loop. And put that loop in a pod or an egg, or kind of like an incubation energetic container. So now each one of you should have their own incubation station. Looks like an eggshell physically, but it doesn't have to be necessarily, but your incubation structure that is linked through nurturers, nurturing. And just breathe into that harmony and containership too. Now, everyone's structure and hub, your family, your school, your community, link that structure to each other. So each structure gets support from the other. And feel that connectivity and that connection of everyone being supported and supporting. Through nurture consciousness, essentially. And when you feel complete and connected, and full and supported and heart opened, come back to the room at your pace. And take a deep breath, put your hand on your heart. And everyone can say out loud or to yourself, this is possible for the world. I know this is possible.
It's possible for the
This is
world.
possible for the world.
This is possible.
I know this is
Creating
possible.
nurture consciousness and attuned communities is possible.
Creating attuned consciousness and attuned communities is possible.
And I don't have to be disempowered and alone and with unattuned environments anymore. I don't.
You don't have to be disempowered and alone with unattuned environments anymore.
Nope, no more. So let's make it happen together. I'm here to support you, however you want, however you need. Whether it's a school you want to help become attuned, whether it's your child's school, whether it's your community, whether it's your synagogue, whether it's your friends, whatever it is, it's possible to change our relational environment, to build thriving communities, to see your community thrive, to see your family thrive. It's been tested, time tested, evidence-based, whatever you want to call evidence, like this system has already shown efficacy, and it's also the most natural system for humanity. So it's just about returning, right, to our natural states. Next slide. I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
Yeah,
We're-
Kayla will put my Calendly link in the chat. We have a variety of trainings and a variety of offerings for you, and we really just want to hear from you what you need to create an attuned community. And we want to empower you to realize that it just takes one person. People who come in wanting a family healing ask if they need to involve their family members, and I say no. It really just takes one person to attune a family, and it takes one person to attune any community, and then, you know, it just grows. So let's come back without the screen share. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Shares?
I have one question would be like, what's your definitions of nurturing? Because I think like a lot of guys might say, oh, nurturing, that's not my job.
What's my
Yeah.
definition of what?
Nurturing.
like, because men might not say, oh, I don't have it, my role isn't nurturing. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think you think of it in like a broader way, but I've just how you.
I don't think of it as a like term. I think of it as an energy. If a person doesn't feel like an adequate parent, which most parents don't feel adequate, many parents, they just don't feel good enough. That is a feeling that is they don't feel capable or competent in their ability to nurture, to give, to share their love. I don't see it as like a checklist of everyone nurtures differently. Also. But I knew in the transformation, I felt always like I was second guessing my decisions because I wasn't centered in my self. And so for me, the process of becoming more attuned was really stepping into the joy of nurturing, because I feel good about myself, that what I have to give will be received, and not just received. It doesn't matter if it's received. I feel good enough to be full, and people want to be with me and spend time with me because it's fun and it's enjoyable, and I can share of myself because I feel worthy.
Well, I think you said in there, like being able to share your love. So I think like that would be a pretty workable definition for me.
I love it. All right, let's put that in as a definition.
Yeah.
The knowledge and deep knowing that you're capable of sharing your love.
I think also in thinking about the child as the receiver, the nurturer is basically the giver.
I would add responsibility to that terminology, because to what Jeff was asking is important in terms of how we raise boys and girls, right? We have these constructs that are out there where women are the nurturers, the men are the providers, and that kind of dynamic. And so unfortunately, we do have to deal with that. I'm reminded of Nelson Mandela used to always say, when you speak a language everyone understands, it goes to their head. However, when you learn to speak their language, it goes to their heart. And so if we're going to reach men as nurturers, I was just looking up the root word for the word nurture, because I always like to know what's underneath things as I study, behavior in terms of health, behavior outcomes. And it literally says upbringing, the active responsibility of rearing a child. But it also has different roots that talk about things like to nourish. And so whether it's a male or female, either both and have a responsibility, if you will, to provide an environment that's nourishing, right? So there's a responsibility aspect to that. So I talk a lot about these kinds of dynamics with males, particularly alpha males who are, on the board of a lot of different health tech companies and things like that. And so that's one of the things I talk about all the time with them.
Right.
Because it is their responsibility. And we do know for a fact, Dr. Nina is aware of that as well, that the environment plays a key role in behavior. So it's one thing to have the labels, it's another thing to produce an environment where the embodiment of nurturing can actually take place. That's why it's important to get it into the schools, into these other institutions where there's a hierarchical nature. You have to change the system from the inside out. That will ultimately require for the system itself to change structurally. But right now, we just have such strongholds of constructs out there. Like I'm reminded of a quote that he says, "A long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right. And so this idea that we have all these constructs out there that defines us, that defines labels, defines us as gender, defines us by race, these are just constructs. The point is they're constructs, they're made up.
Exactly. And they're not embodied. And it's a very big felt sense. And children feel it right away. When a construct, a system, a structure is not embodied, there's dysregulated. The nervous system rejects it. And from being in the mental health system and being in those types of disembodied environments that have no real structure in the heart and in the center, it's just dysregulation, stomach aches, headaches, anxiety. Everyone's escalated. Nobody can be harmonized because the structure itself is not really built on anything connected to our humanity. So I do want to respect people's time, and I appreciate so much your presence, your participation. Let this be the beginning of a movement to attune families and attune structures. Please feel free to reach out. Please feel free to connect. And my link is in the chat. A lot of you have my cell phones, and anything you need, I'm here for you. So thank you so much.
Is there a paper version of the book by chance, or a PDF or anything like that?
It's on Kindle now.
Okay.
So it's downloadable.
Okay.
But hopefully in the future, there'll be many more.
Cool.
Thank you so much. It was super interesting.
Thank
This
you.
was awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chuck. Yeah, I want to connect with you, see how you experience it. Yeah.
I want to encourage anyone and everyone here or who's listening to the recording to book that 15-minute call if you feel drawn to this work. You don't have to know exactly what that is going to lead to, but we just want to connect with anyone who's passionate about this so we can collaborate and get trainings out into schools, for families, for communities. So if you feel called, the link is there.
And you could just be grandpa, right? You don't have to be, you could be anyone. You don't have to be a leader. You just have to be someone who's passionate about this. All right, guys, we are going to share the recording with you. Share the recording with people that you feel it will benefit. Yeah, so we want to spread the love.
Excellent.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you
Have a
very
wonderful
much.
day.
This was great.
Thank you.
Okay.
So,
Cheers.
cheers. Bye.